What We Cannot See Pioneers, Season 2, Episode 5. Kopaka stood before a battered and diminished force. His bionicle Blackgear gang, which had managed to break into the lair of the monsters, was very quickly attacked by two of the very inhabitants of the lair. Horrible creatures made from both minifig and bionicle parts attacked his gang, and although they had managed to learn how to kill them by cutting them off their strange tentacles, the monsters had killed a good fifth of his force. His pride was utterly shaken, and he began fearing for his own safety. "They'll turn on me," Kopaka thought with terror. "I have to appear strong to them." Kopaka continued to lead what remained of his former full-force bionicle assembly through the strange world of the monsters. His men were as fearful as he was. They were always swinging around at the slightest noise, making sure it wasn't a monster. They were afraid of all their surroundings, their weapons forever raised as they walked through the lair. But Kopaka and his wandering group of bionicles came across a most unexpected sight. Moving through an open area of the lair of the monsters, Kopaka saw a massive army of minifig soldiers and vehicles. But most surprising of all was the sight of the former king of the bionicles, King Archimod, walking along with them with his spy assistant Gavla and the bionicle who killed Stog, a former member of Kopaka's Blackgear gang. Kopaka thought then, Icarax. Initially, Kopaka did not want to approach the minifigs and his former king. The king despised the gangs of the new land, and the tension between the minifigs and the bionicles, especially the bionicle gangs, was extremely high. But Kopaka began thinking about his own current situation. He remembered the slaughter he was forced to witness earlier, as his men were cut down one by one against the monsters. Yes, they managed to come out victorious, but if Blackgear had any intention of destroying the source of the monsters, they could not do it alone. He decided to make his presence known to the army of minifigs, and he began shouting to the distant military force. The army of minifigs, with their bionicle companions, heard loud yelling in the distance. Strangely, it sounded like normal speech, which was sort of unexpected this far into the Biocine's lair. Everyone in the army began looking around to find the source of the distant calling. Eventually, a soldier shouted from the ranks of the men, "Look there!" The soldier pointed to a group of bionicles, waving at the army in the distance. Mixed conversations erupted amongst the soldiers, and Prime Minister Gyutonoa squinted in order to better see the bionicles. Archimod suddenly burst out next to the army of minifigs. "Kopaka!" Archimod yelled. Icarax gasped. He knew that name. Kopaka was the leader of Blackgear, the most powerful bionicle gang in the New Land. He knew Archimod had despised these gangs, because they destroyed his attempt to make a strong bionicle empire in the New Land. "Archimod!" Kopaka responded in the distance. "Let's settle this maturely!" Kopaka and his men began pacing forward. Archimod swung back to look at the Prime Minister, sitting in his carrier truck. "Prime Minister," Archimod began, "you must listen to me. Those bionicles are scum. You should have our entire force open fire upon them." Gyutonoa looked at him and frowned. "You will stay out of this, Archimod," Gyutonoa ordered. "This may be a joint operation, but I lead it." Kopaka and his men were now approaching the army. General George shouted an order. "Ready your weapons! Do not fire until the order is given!" The cocking of several firearms sounded off, and the men within the army turned their weapons to face the incoming bionicles. Gyutonoa did not stop George from taking precautions. Bionicles and minifigs had a long and violent history between each other. "Why are you here?" Archimod asked Kopaka angrily. Kopaka rolled his eyes and said, "Are you angry that we defied your rule? We're doing much better without it." Archimod growled at this. Gyutonoa ordered his men to drive the carrier truck up to Kopaka so that he could speak with him. Gyutonoa began. "Kopaka, yes?" Kopaka nodded, and Gyutonoa continued. "You likely know who I am, Prime Minister Stanley Gyutonoa of the Minifig New Land Empire. Archimod, his assistant Gavla, and Icarax all joined our ranks recently. The minifig government, with my approval, has launched an offensive against the monsters that have plagued our existence in the new land. This is where our progress has led us so far. Kopaka surveyed the army of minifigs. All weapons pointed toward him. Confidently, he maintained a straight face. Impressive, Kopaka admitted. I am Kopaka, leader of the Blackgear Bionicle Gang. We have also been under attack by terrible monsters of a gruesome sort. We found a weak point in this structure in our grotto, in the New Land, and we broke through. After doing this, we were attacked by monsters, and we lost many of our men. Please, Prime Minister, we too want to see these monsters destroyed. May we join your force? Prime Minister, I advise against it, Archimod said to Gyutanoa. Gyutanoa waved a hand for him to stop. The Prime Minister turned then to look at Archimod. They're your people, Archimod, Stanley said. I won't make a decision regarding them. But you are still a king. We will back your decision, Archimod, but we will not fight these new Bionicles under any circumstances. Keep in mind they could help us. I'll leave you with that. Decide what will become of them. Archimod was left speechless, and turned to face Kopaka. Kopaka maintained his straight face, but Archimod began to scowl. The king walked up directly to the Blackgear leader and stared him in the eye. You brought down the Bionicle Empire, Archimod said through clenched teeth. Kopaka shrugged. You don't consider maybe your poor rule brought it down? Kopaka asked. We set up Blackgear to solve problems you couldn't. You're a gang culture, Archimod said. You think for an instant you're worthy of ruling an empire. Archimod, keep things in perspective, Kopaka said. I don't like you either, and I don't need to, but we're both Bionicle no matter our affiliations. These monsters hate all Bionicles and all minifigs. How about you let us accompany you? After we defeat these monsters, then we'll settle our differences elsewhere. Sound fair? Archimod growled, but looked off, knowing Kopaka was showing some reason. Agreed.